and welcome back to our last keywords and concepts video for the slave trade. We have some more keywords in our last video here, so let's take a look at these. The first keyword we have is diaspora. Diaspora is the word we use to refer to people who have been dispersed or spread. Notice the words we're using here, dispersed or spread, away from their homelands. So these are not people who immigrated, right? These are not people who chose to leave their homelands. These were people who were forced away from their homelands. So when we're talking about a diaspora, we're talking about lots of people. So in the modern world, we refer to many diasporas, right? We have several of these. The biggest one that we have is probably the African diaspora, but it's actually getting caught up by an Asian diaspora, an Indian diaspora. Tons of people leaving. Now, again, you start to get into, did they leave voluntarily? Did they not? That kind of thing. So easily, Africans dispersed all over the world, the largest. The other most famous group that we often talk about would be Jews, right? Because they're often forced out of their homelands and have to go elsewhere. So when we're talking about the Black diaspora or the African diaspora, we're specifically referring to those folks who were taken from the continent of Africa during the transatlantic slave trade and spread out all over North and South America, right? So that's what we're talking about with the diaspora. Another keyword we have this week is maroon. A maroon is an enslaved person who has run away from their master and joined a group of fellow runaways. Now, often they would do this in a very secluded or even an unwanted location. They would often be found in like swamps, places that were really, really hostile to life that nobody would want to be. And that was intentional. They didn't want anybody to find them. These groups were often known for extreme violence, like they scared the living daylights out of the white folks. There are all kinds of legends and tales about the Maroons being like superhuman and stuff. Really freaked the white people out. So kind of a fun concept that freaked out the slave owners, kind of, what did you think was going to happen if you did all these terrible things to these people? This is a word we typically see used in the Caribbean because it does have that tie to seafaring. That typically is where that phrase is used. You don't typically see that as much in the southern United States, which is where we typically study slavery in the US, but it's still a word you should know. And then finally, since one of our documentaries is actually talking about slavery in a French colony, I thought it would be a really good time to talk about why we're not talking about France. So in case you haven't noticed, this is not a chronological history class. It's kind of by area, right? And you probably have noticed that we're not doing France at all, which you may find a little confusing given the fact that France was in North America during this time. Well, the French actually, their early colonial adventures were a little odd for Europe. They didn't colonize the same way we typically saw like Spain and England do it. Their initial forays into North America were largely for fur trading, so they would not set up huge settlements. They were just kind of sending out groups of men to hunt animals and make trades with the Native Americans, and then bring that stuff back. It took them about 100 years or so to actually get a proper colonial system up and running. And by that point, they were no longer in what we would consider the modern continental U.S. So for that reason, we did not include them in this course. That's why we haven't talked about France. It's not that I don't like France or anything like that. It's nothing personal. It's just it didn't really apply to our particular course. So that is my explanation for why we're not doing any France, because I thought I would get that question eventually. And the last of our keywords. So now we can get into our documentaries. Yay! See you in the next video.